During the Game Awards, Tekken 8 showed a new trailer that showed new elements for the story as well as returning characters, but the main thing that's been the point of discussion was the new gameplay system they showcased called the Heat System. It appears that the developers of Tekken 8 are focusing on making the game more exciting to watch, both for casual players and for those who are interested in the esports scene. They're doing this by emphasizing aggression and implementing gameplay systems that motivate players to be more offensive. They believe that this will make the game more entertaining for players and spectators alike, regardless of skill level. It is ultimately up to the players and fans of the game to decide whether these changes are successful in achieving that goal. The concern is that Tekken is losing a lot of its technical depth by forcing interactions, by making the defensive player have limited responses available when dealing with an aggressive player. Where normally you would be able to sidestep or do a high crushing or sidestepping counter move, if you get caught in this heat action, now you can only stand there and choose to block high or duck low.
We noticed many people saw the trailer and thought that only certain moves kind of initiate the state, but that's not the case. That's just in the trailer, but there are other ways to use this system.
Harada did go on to explain in an interview with IGN that the focus on this year's Tekken is to make it both fun to play and fun to watch, and mentioned an exaggerated scenario of how if two equally skilled players fought each other, perfectly defending, then nothing would be happening as no one would be able to take damage. And this is where I feel like you can sort of get an understanding of what Harada and the team are truly going for. As good as Tekken is competitively, they want to strike a balance where the game is exciting to play and exciting to watch, and they want to introduce mechanics and scenarios that emphasize that. Now, I'm not a competitive Tekken player by any means, so I won't be able to justify how this would all work on a competitive level. There are way better people that are in the scene that can explain that side of things leagues better than I ever will. However, I do want to touch on the aspect that seems to go ignored in this conversation. Tekken as it appears as a spectator sport.
Little... Oh, here we go, counter hit. I can feel it in my loins. The crowd is going crazy. Oh, yeah!
The sole American.
Oh, he's going against the wall.
Majin, is he going down?
We're going downstairs. Backing up underneath with the
Ollie
kick.
He has to.
He ducked it.
Oh, you gotta be careful.
No.
And that's the...
He's gonna do it. He got the round.
And the JDC are ready
Look
for
at the time. Look at the time.
Oh, this is way too exciting. He's working him. He's gonna have to either stay on the ground.
Look at the time.
And again, he's playing soul
He
combat.
He broke it. Look at it.
Oh my God.
JDC.
Oh, he gets it. One more hit can do it.
Oh my
the block.
When you take the sentence Harada says into context, it makes it seem that what he's mentioning is that the fights in Tekken where two players are playing as safe as possible, barely doing anything, is not that exciting to watch, and probably not that exciting to play either. Competitively speaking, I'm sure a lot of players could argue the opposite of that statement, but as a spectator that enjoys watching these tournaments as well as playing the game, that's how I tend to feel, and the examples I'm going to use are some of the best I can come up with. Little Majin's EVO run in 2018 and Ni's Grand Finals EVO match in 2022. This is what separates Tekken gameplay that's exciting to watch versus not so much. Now, can you tell the difference between these two matches? It would be hard to find someone that doesn't agree that Little Majin's EVO run was the peak of how exciting Tekken was to watch. To this day, it's a lot of people's number one. It put Tekken on the radar of people even outside of the FGC. This man's matches were so impactful that people had never even heard of the game were talking about it. For me, I knew it left an impact when my own co-workers, who barely played even just mobile games on a rainy day, started talking about it. And if you watch these matches, it's very clear why. Even if you took away the fact that Majin was an underdog during this, his gameplay showing of King was exactly the kind of exciting that made Tekken so fun to watch. The aggression from both players and the back and forth and momentum shifting with so many wild risks being taken every match was just breathtaking to watch. And then you look at Ni's and the difference is noticeable. Now don't get me wrong, even when Tekken is at its lowest, it's still Tekken, and is always one of the most exciting games to watch at any event. And none of this is to discredit the 2 players that made it to finals in 2022, but after all the years of tournaments and the same thing popping up, it was clear that people didn't like seeing the same characters show up every top 8 just as much as they didn't like games being poking matches where no momentum is being gained. Or you could also include matches that have people getting outright destroyed. With Tekken being a game filled with legacy related knowledge checks, it's easy to end up on any side of this. So when you look at these grand finals matches, yes, the skill he's demonstrating at being able to defeat a character like Geese Howard, who could kill you off of a jab or even a parry, is really insane, but it wasn't as exciting to watch for someone that doesn't understand the game as, say, Little Majin's matches were. Of course, it doesn't mean that they didn't have any hype at all, but hopefully you get my point.
10 seconds about left right now.
It's close. He's got one more bar. Nee can be champion in 5 seconds. He's got the lead. He's got the lead. Nee's gonna do it in 3, 2, 1. Nee is your Tekken 7 champion.
Now, with all that being said, Tekken being a fast-paced game where split-second decisions can make or break a round is what makes it compelling for a lot of competitive players, but I also can't help but ask, is it always fun to watch when it's like this? Whenever talking about this stuff, you also need to view it from the perspective of the average person attending these events. So if you're trying to explain why the competitive integrity of a game is all hindered by flashing effects or slowing down of the game, or even taking away player agency at the cost of making things look cool, you're just going to hit a wall when half of the people this stuff is catered to in the first place don't understand a thing you're saying, because that's the kind of stuff they don't have to actively think about when watching the game versus playing it. But let's look at another thing that was added in Tekken: slow-mo. Slow-mo in Tekken was probably single-handedly the best addition ever made into a fighting game, but it also slows the game down, which players usually don't want to happen all the time. But it's also something that's so good enough to watch that you could make compilations out of just slow-mo moments. Now the reason it worked is because it emphasized big moments that happened in a round. 2 players clashing when one or both are near death. Now other games did do this before, but Tekken was the first to include the near death part, making it way more exciting to watch. It was so successful that now other games are adapting it for other big moments in their games. For example, Street Fighter 6 having an active parry mechanic where if you land a parry, the game slows down and you get this big aha moment. This is the only thing I can see that sort of points at what the direction the team may want for Tekken 8. But of course it is only one piece of an overall pie, so while I am certain there's more to it than what I've currently laid out, it's the one aspect I feel like I can explain since I'm not that into competitive Tekken, to be able to articulate the implementation of this Heat system and how it would work. So what can the Heat system bring to the table then? For me, it feels like it may add to the readability of matches, giving people watching and playing a clear understanding of who's at advantage at the current moment. The key factor on this is just how these heat actions are activated, which we currently have no details on, other than the heat system articulates aggressive. But since the only gameplay we have managed to see shows characters already doing attacks when doing these heat actions, it would hopefully indicate that this isn't something that can happen out of nowhere like a rage drive. So if it's something you don't have to look out for, it hopefully won't be as surprising as, say, the wall crush system was, where there's very little time to realize what is happening, and that you're going to have to take a potential mix-up in the next 10 frames. Aura, the explosiveness of moves are all there to hopefully make it as easy as possible to understand that a heat action is being performed, and for you to be able to respond appropriately. Especially if all this comes out of a move to begin with, so if you're blocking, your character gets pushed back a ton, and you get given enough time to react to this being a heat action that is being performed. This is all wishful thinking though, as it's up to how players actually respond to seeing this stuff in motion and if it's easy to understand or not. In general, making a game more exciting to watch can sometimes come at the expense of its complexity or competitiveness. However, this is not always the case, and ultimately the success of the changes will depend on how well they are implemented and received by players. Harada even mentioned himself that the last thing he wants is to constantly interrupt the flow of the match, so hopefully this heat system is actually not going to be as frequent as people are assuming it would be at the current moment. There's always a balance that needs to be struck when it comes to these things, and I think Harada and company are fully aware of this. Hopefully they do decide to do a public beta at some point, like Street Fighter has, to hopefully get player feedback on these new systems as soon as possible. Because for something as new as this, it's important to allow it to be cleared up by letting players experience the game for themselves and get the discussion rolling that way rather than relying on speculations. And, well, ultimately this is all off of a minute-long trailer, where this was only a small part of it to begin with. Harada and Murray did show additional clips after the Game Awards, so we did get a clearer picture of what they are going for. But ultimately, it's all up to how much damage people can get out of these situations versus how much they happen. We will be seeing more of Tekken 8 at future events, and by then hopefully the mechanics are more fleshed out and the team will be able to actually showcase a match, or at the very least, explain how these heat systems are supposed to work. Tekken is changing, and it is a good thing to see, and I for one am excited to see where it ends. As for me, I'm just hoping they get more offline content into this one, because that's one of the biggest things that Tekken 7 lacked for me, but that could be its own future video. Overall, I just wanted to give my 2 cents on the Tekken 8 discussion on the heat system. Hopefully I was able to at least shed light on the Spectator side of things and how that may be influencing the decisions being made by the developers. Ultimately though, the competitive players are the ones that dedicate the most to the game, so if you haven't seen what pro players have said concerning these mechanics, I think it's important to hear them out and see what the deal is surrounding this whole thing. If you got your own opinions on all this, I'd love to read it in the comments. Hope you all have a good day, and hopefully this not being a Metal Gear video won't get me killed. Until then, I'll see you all on the battlefield.